welcome to another MJ Gaming Spotlight. And I try to get these little videos out every other Saturday, or every Saturday rather, but sometimes it's impossible. All right, so for those of you that don't know, MJ's Gaming Spotlight is a short video that I use to talk about a game, any game in my library. I choose it randomly and then talk about it a little bit. Go over the core mechanics and go over some of the things that maybe attracted me about the game. And that's it. It's a very informal talk, and it's not by any means a in-depth analysis of the rules. It's nothing of that. It's just very informal and kind of a geeky, fun little talk. So, all right. So on this week's Spotlight, we have Song of Blades and Heroes, and this is advanced Song of Blades and Heroes. Song of Blades and Heroes is the predecessor. This is the upgrade, basically, right? And it's an excellent little rule set. It's a rule set that's very good for beginning wargamers because it's not overly complicated. So let's start talking a little bit about Advanced Song of Blades and Heroes. This is a fantasy skirmish miniatures game, and it's written by Andrea Sfilagoi, and I'm sorry if I butcher that. I really am. But it is the core rule book, and it's a small book. It's about 88 pages. Okay, so it's not very big. Most of the rules are condensed in the very front of the book. So, all right. So, Advanced Song of Blades and Heroes. There is a basic map. As soon as you open the book, you have a nice little map of the world. It's very basic with just some major land masses of this world, right? And I kind of like those kinds of maps because you can really fill in the blanks, right? It's just like the name of continents, islands, and things like that. And then the rest you could just fill in yourself. So that's pretty cool. The name of the world is Norendal, and this is a miniature skirmish game. To me, it almost plays like an adventure game, really, kind of like a game like Frostgrave or Rangers of Shadow Deep, just because it has the potential for a lot of narrative to be included into it. You know, if the players decide, especially when playing campaign mode. So we have the basic components of the book. It jumps right into the rules right after a little bit of fluff. It gives you a couple of pages of fluff. Then it jumps right into the rules. Now, this game uses measuring sticks, and I've made my own through the years. I have these little interchangeable measuring sticks that I use in all my games. It just makes it easier to move in areas of heavy terrain. So this game uses those sticks, and it gives you a little table to tell you what the different sizes of the sticks are. You use 3 sticks, short, medium, and long. And those sticks will be used to calculate movement and ranges of spells or ranged attacks, etc., etc. So it's interesting. And players are defined as either the attacker or the defender, depending on an initiative roll. You only roll initiative once in this game. And then after that, basically it's all, we usually play whoever finishes first gets to go first in the next turn. However, because of the core mechanics of this game is based on successes or failures. Numbers of successes or failures will determine the course of the turn. So that's very much like Deep Wars. If you've seen my Deep Wars videos, you know that Deep Wars actually uses this same core engine. Okay, it's the same engine as Song of Blades and Heroes. Success or failure mechanic. A player will have a choice of 1, 2, or 3 dice to roll when deciding on activation. Okay, so 1, 2, or 3 dice to activate any figure. Rolls are then compared to a Q score or quality score, which then tells you if you succeed or fail. Equal to or greater than the Q, you succeed. Anything lower, you fail. Okay, so easy enough. The interesting thing about the core mechanics of the game is that your opponent has a chance to react with one of their figures for every one of your failures. So if you roll 1 failure, they get 1 reaction with any figure before you can react, before you can activate. And if you get 2 failures, they can either decide to react with 2 figures or steal the initiative, and then play the turn passes over to your opponent. So 2 failures or more is bad news. 3 failures and that's it. It goes to the opponent. Your turn ends. So it's pretty interesting. And so if you roll multiple failures, your opponent then can use all those failures to react against you or steal the initiative. The main idea to this core mechanic is fog of war. You never really know if your entire warband's going to activate for the turn. So play goes back and forth, back and forth. Sometimes you get a really good turn where you get a lot of successes and you can do a lot of stuff, and other times you can't. So it's interesting. Now, the quality score is not just for activation. Q scores also determine jumping, whether you can jump over a chasm, right? Resisting spells, that's another important use of Q scores. So basically, Q scores will be used for a lot of different things in the game, and it will be determined through success or failure of the Q score. So that's interesting. You have a table on page 12 also that highlights all the potential actions and the costs to those actions. So tied to this core mechanic of success or failure, in order to activate, you get a little table, and it'll tell you a power combat roll, right? Power combat roll costs 2 actions. So remember, you get up to 3 actions because you get to roll 3 dice. You get to choose to roll 3 dice or 2 dice, whatever it is. So if you choose to roll 3 dice and you get all 3 dice as successes, you're going to get 3 actions for that figure. So then it can do a variety of things. So depending on those actions, they're going to cost. They're going to have a cost. And so you're going to look that up on the table, and it'll tell you exactly what it is. It's a very simple table. In some cases, some characters can bank actions, and this is more for spellcasters. There is a magic system in this game, and spellcasters can bank actions and then use them later on. So for example, to dispel a spell, right? So it would be for that. So it's basically holding an action until a time when you can use it. So that's more for spellcasters. Now on spellcasters, to cast a spell, spellcasters begin the game knowing several spells, and this is determined by taking the number 8, subtracting it from the spellcaster's Q score, and you get the number of spells that you can choose for your caster. So that usually it's like 4 spells, 3 spells, it depends, right? Depends on the caster's Q score. Okay, so a spellcaster can also use their actions to move, cast a spell, a combination of these things, right? So depending on your successes, you're going to be able to do more stuff, just like any other figure, basically. Okay, so let's move on to combat. Melee is simultaneous, so both opponents will be rolling at the same time, and of course higher number wins. Now to that roll, you're going to be adding a combat score, and whoever wins that wins a combat. But here's what's interesting about the combat mechanic. You get 3 possibilities, outcomes to any kind of engagement: recoil, knockdown, or out of action. There are two more possibilities as well, but we're going to go over those in a second. So and here's the tricky thing that used to screw me up a little bit. You're using the raw scores of the dice to determine the next two possibilities, all right? But first things first, in combat, the higher score beats the opponent, right? If you rolled an even dice score, and this is only the dice without any modifications, the loser falls prone. If you beat your opponent with an odd score, the loser recoils by one base length away from the opponent. Okay, so that's interesting, and that used to screw me up a little bit in the beginning because it's without any modifications. It's the raw dice rolls that determine this. Now, if the winner of the combat doubles, the loser is then out of action. So if the winner of the combat rolls a 6 and the loser rolls a 3, the loser is out of action even before any modifiers, okay? If the winner triples the loser, so if the loser rolls a 2, the winner rolls a 6 with one of their dice, that is a gruesome death. And that means that will trigger a morale check for any friendly figures in the area. And there's usually a stick length, whatever stick length it is, for that area. Now, models, if they fail their morale, they will retreat. There is free hacks in this game. So if you have to retreat past an opponent, they can get a free hack against you. There is such thing as unarmed models, and they have penalties as well in combat. Ranged combat is pretty much the same thing, except that it's modified by things like target size. It's also modified by range and by cover. Okay, so the usual things that you see in many games are same here. Okay, so I went over morale. Now, next, the book goes into conditions. And conditions, it's a couple of pages long, and they're brought about either by scenarios or by abilities that the characters have. So it adds a little more flavor to things. Conditions, an example would be transfixed. So one of your models could be transfixed. Maybe there's an enchantment on a terrain. It becomes transfixed. Fatigue, deafened by noise, or even blinded, a flash of light from a terrain piece that is enchanted or whatever, and your model is blinded, and there are consequences for all these things. Next, on page 46 of the book, and it goes on from page 46 to about page 66, are all the traits and abilities. So a big part of the book, not surprisingly, is traits and abilities. And these are important because they will add flavor to your character. And every model will have 2, 3, or even 4 traits and abilities. Okay, so depending on the faction and the model type and everything, that will determine the traits. Traits come with the characters, and they are highlighted in the character profiles. On page 67, we have group activations. So you do have group activations, goes over that, and terrain effects on models. So it does have rules for terrain. And I'm going to go back a little bit to the magic system. I didn't say too much about the magic system. It works on the same core mechanic, the success or failure mechanic. What's interesting is every spell will have a power. So power 1, power 2, or power 3, whatever it is. Depending on the number of successes you roll, that's the power of the spell. So if I roll 2 successes on 3 dice, I'm going to be able to kick off a power 2 spell. Now, there are spell failures in this game, so you have to be careful. If you get too many failures, that spell can backfire. Okay, so the more successes you roll, the more powerful the spell can become. And if you rolled 3 successes and you get you rolled 3 successes and you want to cast a power 2 spell, you can use that last success to actually move. Okay, so interesting. It gives you a lot of options. It's a very good little mechanic. I didn't think I would like it at first, to be honest. And after playing a few games, I actually really got attached to this rule set. It's interesting. Okay, so that's basically what I'm going to say on Magic. It's really not that complicated. There are quite a few spells that you can add for your character, so you do have some interesting spells to use. Then towards more the end of the book, you get environmental rules, such as weather. I always like these kinds of things because we don't use them enough in our games, and they really do give the scenario a little bit more of a challenge, right? It's an extra little challenge. So you could be fighting in a snowstorm or in the rain, right? Where ranged attacks get really hammered. You can't really do that much range, so you're relying on your close combat and everything, right? So environmental effects, always interesting. I'm glad that this rule set has that. Campaign rules. It does have a small section on a campaign, how to play campaign. There's a few rules for that. That's where you can add all your narrative. Interesting thing about the campaign rules is that any model that is knocked out of action, right, instead of counting as a casualty, you roll on a table to see what happened to it. Any other result and the model is a casualty. But, like, for example, a gruesome kill, it's dead. But if you're knocked out of action, at the end of the game, you keep track of that, and then you roll on a little table, and it tells you what happened. Just like Frostgrave or any of those games like that, you know, that's kind of tied into the campaign structure. So that's pretty cool. And there's a lot of other little rules that change the campaign as well. For example, Magic. Your Magic user is not constrained by the number 8 minus the Q score, and that's your spells, the spells that you know. Not in the campaign section, there's a slightly different mechanic. So that's cool. And then after the little campaign section, which is about a couple of pages, it also shows you how to do your own unit profiles if you want to add additional profiles. But the back of the book has quite a few little unit profiles. All your typical fantasy tropes. So you get like elves and dwarves, and you get lizardmen, which I really loved, undead, and humans, you know, all the familiar fantasy tropes. And basically in a profile, you get the points value of the model, you get its quality and its combat. Those are the only 3 scores. The next thing, the only thing that you have to learn is the different traits and abilities. A model can have quite a few different traits and abilities. For example, I'm looking at a bandit leader. It's a personality, so that's where the model fits in the grand scheme of things. Personalities, or if it's a personality, it is a character, so you can only have one of them. All right, and so they're special in a particular way. They're not your typical grunt. So for that personality, you have several traits here. 10 different traits. So this guy has stealth, a hero, leader, short bow, right? Stealth. So all those different traits. So that's where the learning curve comes. It's remembering what all those traits mean. Lower grunts don't have that many. Usually 3 traits. You know, when you have a trait like short bow, that affects the range of the weapon, and short bows have a less range than long bows, for example. So that's it. There's a little bit on that. Weapon, I'm going to backtrack a little bit because now I'm remembering the book does separate weapon types into categories, kind of the way Frostgrave does, you know, where you have like a heavy weapon, a light weapon. It's kept very general, so this way you can basically use whatever models you want, right? And then based on those categories, those weapons do get some kind of benefit. So I just want to backtrack, make sure I say that right. In the back of the book, you have a bunch of the basic tables that you will need in the game, and it's only 3 tables really. It's really not a lot. 3 tables, and then you get a quick reference sheet at the very back of the book. Really, it's not very complicated. It's an easy system. One of the things I loved about Advanced Song of Blades and Heroes, it is a miniature agnostic game. That's very important because you're going to use whatever miniatures you have in your collection, and you can customize your characters whichever way you want. Now, in addition to that, and I'm not going to talk about these in this video, I'll use another video to talk about these. There are several expansions. I have 3 of them. They're designed for Song of Blades and Heroes, the predecessor of Advanced Song of Blades and Heroes. However, I've used these in all my advanced games and they work great. So these are different expansions. You have like elves. There's a book dedicated to elves and kind of forces of nature kind of thing. Then you have Hammer and Forge, which is dwarves, and dungeons. You get rules for dungeon crawls. So getting those supplements, I do recommend it once after getting the book and playing a couple of games with the book, then look into those little supplements. It will add flavor to the game, especially the dungeon rules. I've used that to generate my own kind of cave games. Now, in terms of my channel, I have some very old videos on a couple of games that I played. I'm going to be deleting those in the future and replacing them with newer videos for this game. So hopefully I'll have some new battle reports in the future. I really recommend it if you're looking for something different. If you haven't heard of it, I bought my book at Ganesha Games, but you can find it in various sellers, including War Games Vault and Drive-Thru RPG. You can buy them in digital form. They're cheaper, or you can buy the book. Even Amazon sells the book, actually. So there's a lot of places to actually get the book, and I highly recommend it. It's a really good and fun system. So hopefully we'll get some battle reports in the future, and we'll show more examples of this great little game. So, all right, folks, that's all I have for you on Gaming Spotlight. I hope you liked it. And as always, keep gaming and have fun with your war games. Have a great day, folks, and we'll talk in the next video.